Hello everyone, and welcome to my first video. Today I will be showing you how to draw a dragon's hand. So we start out by drawing a rhombus shape, which will soon be the palm. Be sure to make the corners rounded, unless you want them to be sharp. After I make a bit of a wrist, I will make the outline of the claws. I won't make the individual claws yet, but I'll just make an outline denoting where the tips and the start of the claws will go. Now I will make a forearm, widening the wrist when needed. After this is done, I will start drawing the thumb by drawing a claw and then a base. Now that we've sketched out the basic form of the hand, it's time to have some fun. Start by sketching out the outline of the first claw. Be sure that the base of the claw is at the end of the palm. If the talon is too short for your liking, make the claw outline larger. You can give the dragon as many digits as you want, but for this one, I will be giving it 4 fingers and 1 thumb, just like a human. Whoops, I forgot to do the finger pads, so I'm just going to add circles. These will help with drawing creases on the fingers later. Now just continue drawing till you have the amount of claws that you would like. Okay, so now I've finished the last claw. Now it's time to start doing some erasing, just cleaning up the extra lines that we won't need anymore and that don't actually contribute to the dragon's hand. I will be using different hardnesses of pencils, but it really doesn't matter. I will show you the drawing that I did at the end using only an HB. Now I'm going to tidy up inside the hand, clearing out the extra lines on the wrist and the fingers. Okay, so now that we've gotten that part taken care of, we can start to draw the actual claws on the hand. They're actually pretty easy. You just draw a curved line on the edge of your fingers. I'm going to outline the thumb a little bit here and give it an individual claw too. Pretty soon I'll be clearing out the extra lines in the thumb. I will also add little creases to the fingers. We'll also add creases along the thumb, but be sure to do it along the circles that we made earlier. Now I'm just going to touch up the hand a little bit, add little details, outline the claws, I guess. Also going to darken the outline of the forearm because it's still rather light. I will also do a little curve in the palm and a bit of a separation between the lower fingers and the palm. Now I will draw the boundary between the 2 different kinds of scales, the ones under the arm and the ones on top of it. Be sure to create this boundary on each of the fingers as well. This will give it a much more 3D look. Switching to a different digital brush, but for those of you using pencil and paper, just press a bit harder with your pencil. I'm not going to be coloring them in order, but the important thing is that they all get colored, unless you want your dragon to have white claws. Okay, so I actually just realized this, but the color I've been using for the claws wasn't actually black, so I'm just going to change it to that real fast. So now that I've blocked in all the colors on the claws, I'm just going to change to white and do the highlights on them, and then I'm going to do the thumb. Okay, I've got all the claws done now, and all that I need to do is do the scales. This part is more optional than the claws or drawing the arm, but I'm going to start with the divider between the upper and lower arm. I'll just go over and darken it as well, make it a bit wider. I'll do that on all the fingers too. Now I'm just going to darken the outline of each finger, mostly just the underside, but also maybe the underside of the arm a little bit. Let's add shading on the palm and under the wrist, and also on the thumb and fingers. If you're doing the shading, consider where your light source is from and draw the shadows on the hand and fingers accordingly. Shading between the fingers can also give it a really nice 3D effect. Now that we got all our shading laid out, we can change to a blender to blend it. If you're doing this in real life on pencil and paper, you can just use your finger, but remember, when you start shading something, it will get lighter. If the shadows seem too light to you, you can go in and darken them with even more shading. But remember, the scales will most likely have their own shading, and they will also make it look darker. Now I'm going to start doing the underside scales. They're long and flat, and they are so flat they don't really have much shading on them, except for the shading that naturally occurs on the curve of the arm. If you want to, I guess you could do different kinds of scales right here, but these are just my favorite to do. And I will also put these on the hand. Make sure to follow all the creases that you have made. But as you can see here, even adding these small scales in light pencil makes the hand look a little bit darker. Now that I've got the scales on the bottom done, I will start preparing for the scales on the top. I'm going to shade the top of the arm a little bit, mostly near the division. I'll do it on all the fingers too. Now I'm just going to blend it before I start adding the scales. They'll be very dark, so this will barely matter. It's just there to denote where most of the shadows are on the top. Now we can start doing the scales. Just draw uneven ovals on the arm, unless if you want a different shape of scales. But in this one I'll just be doing the basic oval scales. They will be much darker than the scales on the bottom, at least the ones I'm doing, but you can make yours lighter or the same color if you want. We'll continue these up the wrist and eventually onto the fingers, but if your scales are too big to do this, just make smaller and smaller versions as you go up the arm. Okay, so now that I've got the scales done, I'm going to start shading in between them. This will be one of the darkest areas on the whole entire hand, or rather arm, but you get it, it'll be really dark. So I just shade between each scale to add some contrast. It takes a little while, but once you have it done, you can start shading each individual scale. Now that we're done, we can just go over the shading that we put in earlier to make it darker, because I want these to be a lot darker than the under scales. I'll not be blending this shading because it could potentially ruin the scales by smudging the lines between them, but I also want the scales to have a rougher look. This is also one of the most tedious parts of the drawing, shading each scale to give it a highlight and a shadow. You don't have to do this if you don't want to, but it really gives it an extra sense of depth. So now that we've pretty much finished the hand, you can just go over with an eraser and a pencil and clean up the stuff that you missed, or the stuff that you accidentally erased, or just adding more shadows where it seems like there isn't enough. Thanks for watching! I hope you enjoyed my first video.